All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stigma-Free Society's Facebook Live event. My name is Gerry Friesen, also known as the Recovering Farmer. I am a stress and conflict management specialist working out of Manitoba. Because of my own journey with mental illness, I have a real passion in talking about it because it is in talking with others that we can find a path forward for ourselves. You can learn more about me by visiting gerryfriesen.ca. Through this Facebook Live event, I am representing the Stigma Free Society, which is a Canadian registered charity that aims to reduce stigma of all kinds with a focus on mental health. This event is part of their Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit, an online community based mental health program that creates access to mental health education and peer support training, as well as practical and relatable resources for those living in rural and agricultural communities. You can find the toolkit at ruralmentalwellness.com, and I'll mention that again at the end. I am excited today to have the opportunity to chat with Marcel Hacault. Hi, Marcel. How are you?
I'm pretty good, pretty good.
Good. Marcel and I have known each other for a number of years, and we used to be involved in the pork industry together and then lost touch with each other, as it were, and somehow have circled back and are doing some work together again. So it's my pleasure to have Marcel on with us today. I know he has a real passion for mental health and agriculture. And I know he's going to talk to us today about some safety stuff and how that relates to mental health. So, really looking forward to it. Before we jump in, I'll just give you a brief introduction to Marcel. After graduating with an ag degree, Marcel and his wife were the owner operators of a farrow to finish hog farm in Niverville, Manitoba. He then became involved in agricultural advocacy, becoming vice president of the Keystone Agricultural Producers from 97 to 99 and chair of the Manitoba Pork Council from 1999 to 2004. Until his retirement last year, he served as executive director of the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association, spearheading the organization's transformation from a safety grant administrator to an organization that led national efforts to improve agricultural safety across Canada. I know one of the things that is clearly missing in his bio is that currently Marcel also serves as the chair of the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program, and that's really where Marcel and I have reconnected again and again appreciate his passion. So, Marcel, welcome again, and let's jump right into it.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your agricultural work you've done over the years. I know, like me, you're a retired farmer, whereas I'm a recovering farmer. And you and I have sometimes talked about the difference in that, but just kind of talk about your farming experience and how you went from that to some other work.
Yeah, so I grew up on a mixed hog farm, mixed ag farm. So we did not have hogs. We had a couple cows and some land and the whole bit. And still remember my brother and I, we'd hand milked two cows every day, and really did not enjoy that. But my dad said it would build character. So and it did. It actually still have some leftover muscles, I think, from those days. But so did that, and then decided I was going to get into agricultural engineering because at that time in the 70s, late 70s, versatile co-op implements and a whole bit. There was a thriving agricultural manufacturing industry in Manitoba, so I was going to be one of these engineers that design stuff. And I had way too much fun in engineering, so I had to take a year off and reconnect with my roots. And then came back. Thought I still wanted to get some education because my dad was pretty persuasive. He figured all of us kids, and there were 9 of us, should have a fallback, and farming should not be one of them. So he encouraged all of us to get further education. So got my ag degree, met my wife, bought a hog farm because at the time that's the only thing that seemed to make sense financially, cash flow and the whole bit. Knew nothing about hogs. Still remember the first day when they delivered all the sows, and I went into the barn. They were screaming for feed. I said, I sure hope I like this because I'm stuck with it. So I did that, and then I got a little bored in the barn, so I became involved with Keystone Ag because they dared do a checkoff on me, and I said, "There's no way somebody's taking $80 out of my pocket without me having a say." So I actually became involved with them, and also became involved with Manitoba Pork and the whole bit, and actually ended up being a chair there for 5 years when the industry was just booming in Manitoba. And then, as it were, midlife crisis, I guess it was 46. The hog barns needed major investment. So I figured, you know what, I'll do something else. I'll work with my mind instead of my body, because I didn't think my body could last another 20 years in the hog barn. And got my MBA, and luck would have it, got hired on as executive director with the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association. So did that for 17 some years. Enjoyed that, working with farmers, helping farmers out, advocating for their safety. And then basically full circle, I just decided it was time to spend time with my grandkids and do something a little less administrative. And so retired. And then now I have time to do some volunteering, and decided you reached out, Gerry, and some others, and we started out the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program, which has been a great feather to add to my hat, because I always have to wear a hat because in the sun I burn. So there.
Right on. Well, thanks for that, Marcel. And I know I'm going to kind of jump right into it. I know that while you were still executive director of the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association, you had a passion for mental health and agriculture, and I suspect you probably saw a correlation between mental health and safety. Can you talk a little bit about that correlation?
Yeah, so what part of the activities we did at CASA was we actually had some fatality data from all the fatalities, ag-related fatalities that happen across Canada, because we were trying to understand why farmers got hurt, because nobody really starts out their day saying, today I'm going to lose a thumb or get hurt, right? So started doing some of that. So we collected the data, and then when you do some deep dive into why these things happen, and with the surveys we've had, so most of the time the farmers said if something happened, it's because they were in a hurry, they were preoccupied, or there's even, and this we don't capture, there was even the self-inflicted harm. So and so we've always wondered, what the link was. Well, very definitely the link is if you're preoccupied, if you're worrying about your relationship or worrying about how you're going to get this crop in, you're going to jump steps, and farmers generally get her done, right? There's nothing that's going to stop you. You just get her done. So we don't know how many incidents are related to mental health, but we know it's there, just in the terms of the responses. Hurried, distracted, well, those can be mental health related. And then if you look at other countries, even though we don't collect the stats in Canada, other countries routinely show that farmers are more susceptible to die by suicide than the rest of the general population. So often you look at some of these incident reports and you go, was that really preventable, or was that something a farmer chose as a dignified way out type of thing? So yeah, so we dealt with that at CASA, and actually before a lot of people had started looking at that, we had actually commissioned a survey with farmers to see exactly what caused them to seek help, if they sought help, where could they go, et cetera, et cetera. And even though that happened in 2004, that really still is true to this day, even with the other studies that have happened.
Yeah, and I've spent some time, of course, Marcel, I've talked a lot about that survey you guys did back then. But we also know that Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitten and her team at the U of Guelph have done one in 2016, I believe it was. They're currently doing another one, and I'm fortunate enough to have her on here in 2 weeks, I believe it is,
Okay.
to talk about that survey. But I see there's some of it. I know stress certainly is increasing. I believe the incidence of anxiety and depression are also increasing. But some of it is fairly standard, and part of it is, farmers looking for help. What are the challenges out there for farmers seeking help?
Oh, I think it's much like everybody else. Where to go, where to start, and then if you do find somebody, how can you connect with them? So and then a little bit less so now with Zoom and everything that happens, but in the past, the whole distancing, the isolation was an issue. So how to connect with somebody. So I really don't. I don't think accessing challenges are much different. And I do believe that the stigma around seeking help has improved. It might still be like the rest of the population might be here, and the farmers might still be lagging, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years behind the general population in terms of the stigma related to seeking help. Yeah.
And the other thing that we've heard about, Marcel, you and I have heard about this a lot, is also, so the logistics of getting to someone that can help them is difficult because farming is spread out as far and wide as it is in Manitoba. But there's also another keen concern, and that is regarding these caregivers and, dare I say, a lack of knowledge of the intricacies of agriculture.
I think that's part of the issue. Well, I think part of the issue is confidentiality too. So the beauty about country living is that it's very much an extended family. The trouble is that it's an extended family, so everybody knows your business. So a lot of the when we did our surveys, the farmers who reach out, they don't want everybody and their dog to know that they're reaching out. So that's been that is a challenge, and I think again a little bit less so now with all the connectivity. But and then the other side of it is if if you do need help, where do you start? I think a lot of people manifest have physical conditions that manifest when they're going to see a doctor. So I think a lot of people would, if they're seeking mental health without knowing it, will be going to a doctor. And I think there's probably some room for improvement there where we can get our doctors and our health professionals to maybe recognize some underlying or some hidden factors when some of their clients come in. And I'm not sure if they're attuned to that or if they just see Marcel's coming in with a panic attack or a sore shoulder. Like, why is he coming in again and again and again? And they might not ask the next question, which is, well, how's it going? What's your typical day like, etc. So that maybe he can encourage, point me to, or point us to some resources type of thing.
So you mentioned stigma, Marcel, and I think that's a really important topic that we need to address. You talked about the fact that, that whole piece is improving. We see work that Do More Ag is doing in building awareness of mental health in agriculture. We see other organizations working on it. Do you have any sense, or do you have any ideas on what we could do to even get even more people, or more farmers, more people in the rural community, to be able to forget about that stigma piece and to reach out?
Well, I think probably what your organization is doing and yourself is probably normalizing that conversation. So, and I see that happening when we look at some of the agricultural leaders. They're not just talking about, and even the politicians, and that was part of my goal at CASA was, the politicians are always talking about how they love agriculture and we're going to be exporting X amount and the whole bit, and how we're going to be protecting the environment and how we produce safe food and it's high quality. And part of my goal, and maybe everyone's goal, should be to make sure that the government, the politicians, actually want to protect the people who actually produce that darn food, and both on the safety side and the mental health, because there's a lot of small business owners and a lot of red tape, perceived or otherwise, with the government. And if somebody needs help, so a farmer needs help with his accounting, he'll go to a tax specialist and the whole bit. If he needs help making spraying decisions, goes to hire a consultant. Needs help managing his herd, goes to see a vet. That's normal. Right now, we have to get to the point where if he sees help maintaining his mental health, he goes to see a counselor. That hasn't happened yet, I think, and that would be ideally the goal, is that we get our politicians to say the safety and health of our producers and their families is important. We get the heads of all the agricultural commodity organizations and the Viterras and the G3s, everybody, to also say that. And then farmers actually start to hear that everybody does care about their mental health, wellness, and they don't feel bad knowing that, oh, okay, I need help in this area now. Well, I'm going to go find myself a counselor and help myself that way. I guess ideally that's what we would see happen. And I don't want to, shamelessly plug the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program, but that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that if a farmer needs that tool in his toolkit, that he can try it out on a free basis and get 6 sessions to see what it's like. So it's like getting a free accountant. Who wouldn't go for that?
Okay. That's a good point. I've never made that correlation before, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think we all know, and again, for the viewers out there that aren't in Manitoba, we're being walloped by a snowstorm here in the middle of April, which really none of us wanted. And I was talking to a farmer earlier today who was starting to get antsy because they see their seeding dates getting pushed out further and further. And so, of course, that creates stress. Over the last year, we've had the flooding events in BC. We had drought on the prairies. There was excessive moisture in Ontario. There was the potato wart issue on PEI. Now we have what looks like probably late seeding here. I just saw in the last few days that the chicken producers are dealing with avian influenza. Like, it seems like these stressors just never end. And the ones I've mentioned are ones that are totally outside of control of farmers. Like, how do you see that stress as it relates back to when you and I were farming, as it relates back when you were growing up?
Oh, I think they're always there, and there's, if you look at the literature, a little bit of stress is good for you, right? So it's just a matter of, and that's what the study with Dr. Jones-Bitten had shown, is that the bounce back wasn't happening, or so that's where we were falling at risk as a general farm group. And I think the one thing that has changed, and this comes from, I think it was in Quebec, they had done a survey with the farmers out in Quebec. And it was interesting there when the farmers were saying, you know what, the stressors, the unknowns, the stuff that we can't control is there every day. And he said, and they were kind of okay with that, not pleased, but kind of okay because it was there. He said the thing that really bugged them a lot was that the respect for the profession had dropped. So it was weird in a sense. The farmer didn't mind, all those things he had to deal with, but the fact that the regular Joe, the consumers, were starting to pick on farmers because they thought farmers were abusing their animals or injecting antibiotics in chickens or whatever, that they found really distressing, because they always felt that the consumers or the general public had their back. And that I have no idea how we deal with. I know the commodity groups and stuff are, trying to be transparent on how we do the food and the whole bit. But that was a unique new stressor, I would say, is where in the past you did your job, and you had all the regular stressors that you talked about. I think there's different ones every year. But the thing that was changing was that whole social media, all those, I guess, those attacks, I guess, on the industry that the farmer was really struggling with.
Yeah, and you know what? Farmers make up, what is it, just under 2% of the population. I know that's the case in Manitoba. I suspect it's close to that across Canada. So they're a very, very small piece of the general population. So that makes it more difficult too to be able to build that understanding
And
that's needed.
and we see it too. And so I go back to when I was a hog farmer, like, my kids were in a rural school, and the industry was in the news a fair bit, but they were, grade, what was it, grade 7, 8, 9, they were getting picked on because their dad was a hog farmer. So, no kid deserves that. So it's not, the whole family is impacted by some of this, and that I don't know how you change. And again, I don't want to go on my, rehash history, but you were there too when the hog industry was going through its growing pains, and agriculture itself didn't even stick up for agriculture. So that really, I think that's for us to do better ourselves. But that's no help either. And I guess that's where I could go with another story. But yeah.
Well, and really what you're talking about it again is when you talk about your kids being bullied, picked on, when you talk about some of these other things, it's the stigma of agriculture again that seems to be coming back at farmers in the rural communities on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And we're not, not to blame, no, unblameable. I don't know what the right word is, because we do it. Sometimes we do it to ourselves. Because one thing that really hit home when I was with the Ag Safety Association is I got this call about this farmer who had, stopped feeding his pigs, and it hit the news, and everybody was just going, "Oh, that's a terrible example of a farmer. He should never be allowed to have pigs, and we should take him to court and the whole bit." And I was going along with that, and then after all this discussion, you think to myself, "Whoa, whoa, what are we doing here?" Obviously, this farmer was having issues other than wanting not to take care of his pigs. Where were we as an industry um, to help him? No, we quickly jumped on the bandwagon to vilify him. So even ourselves, I think sometimes we have to look in the mirror and say, how do we support the rest of our industry when they're going through tough times? And that, I think that's part of the stigma too, right? We're quick to blame, and I guess if anything can come out of it, I think we have to be quicker to listen and quicker to help, and then blame right at the end.
Yeah, and you know what? I spoke a few years ago. I was in Alberta. I spoke to a group there and about my own journey and about farming and all the different stressors. And someone came up to me after that speech and said, he was very thankful that he did not deal with any type of mental health issues. So, and so I threw out a challenge to him, and I think that challenge needs to go out to everybody, and that is when we look at the survey that Andrea Jones-Bitten did, and you see the high numbers of farmers feeling overwhelming stress, when you see some of the mental health issues taking root, particularly anxiety, it's pretty clear that all of us have neighbors. And if you do simple math and say 1 out of 2 people or 1 out of 3 people are not doing well, I think the onus is on us to reach out, kind of just like you're saying, instead of judging these people, being able to reach out and say, hey, is there something that we can help you with?
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about all of this going on in agriculture. You and I know what we're doing in Manitoba regarding the farmer wellness program, but how is it that what resources are out there for farmers?
And I'm just aware of the ones I've come across, and I'm not I should say, a client or a customer of those resources. I just know I've dealt with, the programs that In the Know that University of Guelph has come out with. Farm Credit Canada has sponsored some of those awareness sessions. I know in Quebec, they have their Sentinel program also, and I think that's being rolled out across Canada. So I think there's kind of two buckets. I think there's a bucket is if you work with farmers, there's some resources out there on how to recognize the signs. I think Do More Ag offers some of those sessions, and depending which province you're in, Quebec might have, Manitoba probably has its own, but there's very definitely resources on how to recognize some signals if farmers are your customers. And I think as farmers, they're getting to be more and more resources. I know there's some self improvement courses that you can take if you're in a crisis mode. I believe in Manitoba, the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line is there for them. And then I guess if you want to hire the consultant counselor, you can access the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program also. So that's all I'm aware of. Gerry, you probably know more because you're one of those resources, and I think the Stigma-Free Society also has some of those resources.
Well, and they certainly do. One of the, I'm going to connect something you said a few minutes ago to this resource piece, and you talked about going to a doctor and why do I constantly have a sore neck, and so the point there is very often stress sneaks up on us, and we're really not even aware of the fact that it's happening, but we seem to have different aches in our bodies. We become irritable. We have higher expectations for ourselves and for others. Sometimes it's our coping methods. Sometimes that beer or 7 in the evening feels a little bit too good because it relieves a lot of that pressure. One of the resources you didn't mention is certainly Farm Credit Canada has a publication called Rooted in Strength. And like you say, there's a very simple dashboard in there where people can pick up this publication, they can go through it, but what they also get out of there is a way to kind of look at yourself, look in the mirror, and try and find out where you are on the spectrum of stress and anxiety, and be able to deal with it a little more proactively. So that's a resource I always like telling people that they should certainly take advantage of.
I think the issue is not so much the resources that are available, it's how to, you can't lead a horse to water, type of thing. How do you get the farmer to even consider that as a need is probably the toughest.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you certainly are doing the right kind of volunteering in your retirement, Marcel. I certainly appreciate that, as do many others. You know what? Our half hour has slipped by again. It goes rather quickly when we have these conversations. Any parting words you'd like to leave for the audience?
I think just to be open that mental health is part of good farming. You take care of, you're taking care of the animals, you're taking care of your family, the safety and the whole bit. And part of very important is to take care of yourself also.
Yeah, right on. Thank you very much for that, Marcel. Thank you for joining us today. Your insights into mental health and wellness certainly have resonated with me, as I'm sure they have with our audience. Again, just that challenge is out there. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to reach out for help. And I know from my own personal experience, there is hope and there is relief. So people out there, when you watch this video, please avail yourself of the resort. We talked about resources, and certainly the Stigma-Free Society has an awesome resource, and you can find that at ruralmentalwellness.com, and you'll find a rural mental wellness toolkit there. There's a bunch of resource material in there. There's ideas, there's videos, there's interviews. So please avail yourselves of those. And as far as Marcel and I are concerned, we're going to hunker down here for the next 2 days and watch the storm roll in and roll out, and then hopefully the sun will come out and we're going to have a joyous spring here. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks again, Marcel.
Thank you so much, Claire.